Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach has been released for over 2 years now, but many mysteries still lie within the Pizzaplex. There's the mystery of the sticky note room, the messages Gregor receives, and there's one mystery that I haven't seen anyone in the community talk about. In one of my last videos, I went over how Rockstar Row is the key to solving Security Breach and any future games that follow. More specifically, I looked into this display with one eye and animatronic parts and why we should attempt to solve who this eye belongs to. And thanks to you guys for the massive support in that video, I now think we're even one step closer to solving this mystery. So in this video, I'm going to go over all the theories and thoughts in the comment section, and I'm going to go over my own new thoughts so we can finally answer who this eye belongs to. For a quick recap, in my last video, I went over Rockstar Row in each of the displays, and I went over how this is a museum that holds old and new artifacts like Freddy's foot and bow tie or Glamrock Chica's guitar. I also went over how it's impossible to tell where one display originated from, which includes an eye and these animatronic parts. We know Freddy's mic is from Fnaf 1, we know these toys are from Fnaf 4, and this stage is from Fnaf Up Wanted. But again, we don't know where this display is from, and more specifically, we don't know who this eye belongs to. So to try and find an answer, in my last video, I first compared the eye to different animatronics, but this quickly led to a dead end. I then tried to look through the game files, but I reached a dead end when all of the assets had the same name. This is when I decided to dig deeper by importing a 3D model of all of the animatronics into Blender, then taking apart the mask and endoskeleton to really compare the eyes. From Freddy, to Circus Baby, to Balloon Boy, I kept comparing the eyes, but I never found a direct match, and most of them looked like normal animatronic parts. It wasn't until I looked into an endoskeleton from Fnaf Security Breach that I found almost a direct match. The shape of the eye alongside the orange and black parts look identical, and this is when I realized the endoskeletons were somehow the key to solving this puzzle. But the only other endoskeleton that has mattered in the Fnaf franchise, and especially in these newer games, is of course the Mimic. And using evidence from the Tales from the Pizzaplex novels, I was able to conclude that the eye either belonged directly to the Mimic, or it was supposed to represent that the Mimic has always been in the Pizzaplex since the beginning. So you can watch the whole video here to fully understand all the evidence and research done in that video. But again, thanks to the massive support of that video, we're now one step closer to finally answering who this eye belongs to. So by looking at the comments, let's once again deep dive into this display in Rockstar Row. Starting with the comment that I received the most, and I mean a lot. What if it belongs to Molten Freddy? Well, in my last video, I actually skipped over Molten Freddy being one of the only animatronics with one eye, as he is just entered after Circus Baby separated from the rest of the circus animatronics. And he was in the fire that destroyed the Fnaf 6 pizzeria. But either way, let's still take a closer look. When importing a 3D model of Molten Freddy into Blender, we find that his eye is actually just an orange disc and isn't an eye at all. This makes sense when considering Molten Freddy is completely made out of trash, and the only real resemblance to the eye in Rockstar Row is that they both have an orange glow. So I don't really think this eye belongs to Molten Freddy. But moving on to the next comment I received the most, which is that the eye belonged to Nightmare Foxy. In my last video, I skipped over looking into the Fnaf 4 animatronics as they aren't real, but this is technically wrong. Using evidence from the latest Tales from the Pizzaplex novel, we learned that the Nightmare animatronics were actually real, as they were just mannequins on rails. But a gas would cause whoever was in that room to hallucinate the Nightmare animatronics. So what if this eye belonged to the mannequin that created Nightmare Foxy? Now this would be a viable option, but there would be no real way to know that this eye belonged to Foxy's mannequin, and there's no real way to know the mannequin even had eyes. So because of this uncertainty, I don't think the eye belongs to Nightmare Foxy either. But moving on, as these comments suggest, let's look into the green rooms and the rooms surrounding them. Now in the actual rooms, there wasn't much that could help us answer this mystery. There was mainly just items that matched the animatronics and their personalities. It wasn't until I read this comment when I went into the storage rooms behind the green rooms, and that's when I found something worth pointing out. Now it wasn't an answer to who this eye belongs to, but it was actually another mystery. There are tags and sticky notes in all 4 rooms. These notes are the same in all of the rooms, but again they're important. We can find things like question marks, 3 lightning bolts, food court number 1, a note with the number 141 on it, and finally a note that seems to be a drawing of a peach. You may have noticed that the note with the question marks on it is the same one we see on the Help Wanted stage, insinuating that the workers don't know what it is or where it originated from. So I also think that these tags were at some point on the eye and the parts, and we can assume the workers also didn't know what they are or where they came from, but of course this is just speculation. I could make a whole separate video on these notes and what they mean, but for now let's just move back onto to the eyes. But thanks to the comments, I realized to find an answer I needed to look into animatronics that I would never expect, and while working on another video where I covered what the next Fnaf game might be, that's when I found a possible answer. When using an image for Glamrock Bonnie, the eyes immediately caught my attention, and just by looking at this one image, I realized that both eyes shared strong similarities. The eyes had similar shapes, and both eyes also had black and orange wires connecting to them. But of course, to make sure my theory was viable enough, I imported a 3D model of Glamrock Bonnie into Blender, and I took apart the mask and endoskeleton. Then when comparing the eyes, there was almost a direct match, and I think this is the closest I've been to answering who the eye belongs to. But why Glamrock Bonnie? Well, when looking at Glamrock Bonnie in Fnaf Ruin, we can clearly see that he has both of his eyes, and the eye in Rockstar Row would have to be much older than when Glamrock Bonnie was created. And Glamrock Bonnie being the answer almost feels random, but the eye is still somehow connected to him. So when doing basic research on this character, I noticed that one trait or detail of Bonnie translates over to the tales from the Pizzaplex novels and onto another character. We all know that Bonnie is the guitarist of the group, and in one of the stories we learned that a delivery arrived at the Pizzaplex that included state-of-the-art animatronics and an endoskeleton. And the endoskeleton was originally supposed to be the guitarist of the main group, and the endoskeleton is none other than the Mimic. Now, why the Mimic was originally supposed to be the endoskeleton for Glamrock Bonnie is unclear. It could be because of the features or because of his overall look and design. But as we know, the Mimic doesn't become Bonnie, so we can assume that when he was created, they still designed him to look like the Mimic, which is why the eyes are so similar. The reason the eye in Rockstar Row looks so similar to Glamrock Bonnie's eye is because it originally belonged to the Mimic. In my last video, I also came to the conclusion that the eye has to belong to the Mimic, and in this video, it's the same, as that's the most fulfilling answer. This great comment points out the idea that the parts next to the eye could be spring locks. This would make sense as most of the Mimic's costumes had spring locks, so what if these parts are spring locks that came from one of the Mimic's old costumes? Sure, the eye could belong to any animatronic in the franchise, but if this were the case, this would almost feel random. By having the eye belong to the Mimic, it's setting him up as not only the villain in Ruin, but as the new villain in the new franchise. It would also tell us a story about how the Mimic has been in the Pizzaplex for longer than we realized, just like the other Easter eggs in Security Breach tell us that same story, like the sticky note room. I know this answer may feel too on the dot for setting up a future game and a new villain, and I don't necessarily think that the eye even belongs directly to the Mimic, but by the eye at least representing the Mimic's presence in the Pizzaplex, it makes us aware that there's a new villain in the franchise, and it also means he's someone we should be paying close attention to, and we should be looking into every detail that relates to him. So with all that said, I still believe that the eye in Rockstar Row belongs to the Mimic, or at least represents his presence, but there's still many mysteries in Rockstar Row that need to be answered, like the notes in the green room or why other displays even exist. But again, thank you guys so much for the massive support on the last video, and if more evidence from Rockstar Row arises, I'll make sure to make another follow-up video. But for now, I think we have a solid theory on this eye and this display, so what do you guys think? Were we able to answer who this eye belongs to, or are there still mysteries in Rockstar Row that need to be answered? I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure to like and subscribe for more content like this, and thanks for watching.